Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. You're watching BTV World and welcome to the program Newsroom. I'm Faheem Bangash. Now, of course, like every day, we have 4 segments in the program. In the first segment today, we will be talking about the Pakistan-US relations before and after the fall of Kabul. In the second segment today, we will be talking about the US-Taliban deal which hastened the Afghan collapse. This has been said by the US defense officials. And towards the end of the program, we will be talking about the top stories for today. One of those are the Greta Thunberg. She lambasts the world leaders over saying a lot and doing nothing. And after that, we will be talking about the statements given by the ISPR, things which have happened, the sacrifices which have been given by the Pakistan Army. One of Pakistan Army captains has been martyred in the tank in an intelligence-based operation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We will be talking about that now, moving forward to our first segment, which is Pakistan-US relations before and after the fall of Kabul. Before I announce our guest, before we start our debate on that, our researchers have and our producers have prepared a package. Let's take a look at that.
The mercurial Pak-US ties have been historically jolted by myriad geopolitical currents and shifting strategic interests of American establishment. Originally envisioned as strategic alliance, the partnership soon moved into transactional relationship as United States persisted to abandon Pakistan once its strategic objectives materialized. Repeating the same mistakes of Pak-US chronicle, United States conveniently chose to scapegoat Pakistan for outcome of Afghan endgame instead of reviewing its dreadful policies in the region. According to dictates of alliance and diplomacy, Pakistan's sacrifices had to be acknowledged and the country's pragmatic Afghan policy had to be imitated as Islamabad worked incessantly to facilitate peaceful political transition in Afghanistan. Ironically, instead of redefining Pak-US ties in broader scope, 22 US senators moved a draft bill in the US Senate, seeking sanctions against frontline state in Afghan war Pakistan along with the Afghan Taliban by assessing its role in ensuing dynamics. The Foreign Office on Wednesday reacted to the draft bill, terming the references to the country unwarranted, which incurred colossal losses by assuming role of US ally in poorly choreographed war on terror. Foreign Office spokesperson Asim Iftikhar Ahmed noted that such conduct is inconsistent with the spirit of cooperation that had existed between the two countries on Afghanistan since 2001. It is cogent to mention here that Afghan debacle was imminent as United States ignored Pakistan's repeated pleas to resolve the matter through negotiation instead of military power. American intransigence to take responsibility of its strategic blunders and instigation of a zero-sum blame game circumvents the prospects of Pak-US huddle at a critical juncture when cooperation between these two countries is a necessity to assure sustainable regional peace.
Right, so welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, our first guest is Ms. Shabbana Fayyaz. She's a foreign affairs expert. Ms. Fayyaz, welcome to BTV World. Welcome to Newsroom.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam. Now, Ms. Shabbana Fayyaz, we know that the Afghan situation has been evolving ever since the exodus took place, ever since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. We have been seeing a continuous evolution in Afghanistan. And now recently we saw top US senators, they tabled a bill in the US Senate, and I quote this 57-page draft bill. It was called Afghanistan Counterterrorism Oversight and Accountability Act of 2021. Now, the significant part is it made several references to Pakistan. Of course, Pakistan has reacted to it. We know the Foreign Office spokesperson has also reacted to it, given statements. Sheikh Rashid has given statements. What's your take on that?
Frankly, I say I must admit that the terrorism is not only the problem of the United States, it's been a problem of the Pakistan as well. And giving a reactive and a short-tempered response to the US Congress bill, I think will be very, very reactive and may backfire in our case. Although it is said that we have also asked and have repeatedly requested informally and formally and given assurances by the Taliban regime or stakeholders in Kabul that the soil will not be used in any terrorist activities across the border or for Pakistan or any other country.
Right, and also I quote what the draft bill read as far as reference to Pakistan is concerned. It said, an assessment of support by state and non-state actors, including the government of Pakistan for the Taliban between 2001 and 20, including provision of sanctuary space, financial support, intelligence support, logistics, medical support, training, equipping, and tactical, operational, or strategic direction. Clearly, the US is trying to perhaps put sanctions on Pakistan because it is planning to put sanctions on the Afghan Taliban as well. And it said all the people related to the Taliban or people who have perhaps given assistance to the Taliban, they will be putting sanctions on those. Aren't we seeing an upcoming regional instability here?
Well, I will ask you a counter question. How would you interpret a regional instability? Regional instability is already there. The global war on terror has winded up and it has become a regional war. And the regional stakeholders, whether it is Iran, China, Russia, Pakistan, they are the one who have to bear the cost of the US misadventure. And we were also a part, we must not forget the war on terror. We were partner of that, whether we like it or not. But as you've said, that Pakistan has been blamed and going to be cornered. I think that was expected. We need to do our homework and we need to be on not on an apologetic front. We need to put the facts on ground, and I really feel that we should stop just putting the blame across the board. We should stop using the narrative of the victimhood. Rather, we should give a ground based reality picture to the world outside.
Exactly, like you very rightly said, even the National Security Advisor the other day, he said that I'm not asking for any pity from the world, but I'm just saying that Pakistan has been a victim. Yes, Pakistan has hosted millions of Afghans, and Pakistan has paid the highest price in the war on terror. And Pakistan has been time and again saying that we want an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. Also, we know that the agreement which was signed in Doha, that also said that complete exodus will take place in 2021. And as a result of that, we are watching a lot of chaos. And Pakistan has been included in that.
I think the Doha Agreement was signed with good intentions. Of course, Pakistan was in the background of that, and we did play a behind the scene role, at least of a sort of a facilitator. But the fact is that Doha Agreement was not so far being honored by all the parties, including the Taliban and the United States as well. So, saying one thing, obviously, we have said, and or every Pakistani, whether on street or in government or anywhere, wants to have a peace in Afghanistan. Why? Because it is not only for just in realistic world for Afghanis, it is for us. Because we cannot change our geography, and we do have the religious and ethnic and cultural affinities with our neighborhood, and we want this part of the world to prosper.
And also, we've seen that the government of Pakistan has time and again voiced its concern regarding this, and also has said that there should be an inclusive government, and the world, the international community should come forward and help Afghanistan in order for them to come up as a nation, in order for them for humanitarian assistance, of course. That's what the Prime Minister has been talking about. As a human, he wanted to be empathetic enough for the Afghan people, as they've seen war since a very long time. And maybe that has been misperceived, and Pakistan has now been included in that list of people who are assisting, actors who are assisting Afghanistan.
Yes, this is a very, very important aspect, the human aspect that has unfortunately remains and being misplaced and exploited by all the great powers and even the medium-sized power for their benefit in case of Afghanistan. We have seen and we will see the people will continue to bleed across the world, and the selective powers or the stakeholders will use the human rights wherever it suits them. And specifically, if you look what has been happening in the 7 decades old in Indian-held part of Kashmir, nobody is bothered. So much blood has spilled, but where is the conscience of the world? So the same applies to Afghanistan. If Afghanistan has been on fire for decades and decades. But I must say, even those who have ruled Afghanis have not really registered the cost or what they have done to their own generation.
That's true. And also, since you're a foreign affairs expert, we know that the ruling Democratic Party and the Republicans, they currently have 50 senators each in the 100-member upper house of U.S. Congress. Now, it also means that both the sides, they lack the basic majority to pass any legislation. Observers also believe that it's unlikely that this bill will become a law. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I must say, I'm not a lawmaker. I'm an interpreter of international politics and realism or constructivism, you may call it. Laws are made, supposed to be made, uh, and their efficacy remains to be tested on ground. And this really explains the intricacies that only the time will tell. The US has continued to pass the laws. It will pass the laws, so has other parliaments. But who will implement the law? We have the upcoming visit of the Secretary of US State coming to US. If they are cornering that much, Pakistan, that's my simple question is that why they are visiting Islamabad? They need us, so do we need them. So it is the relations between the states are most of the time transactional in nature, and Pakistan-US relationship is essentially transactional in nature.
Also, ma'am, even the Biden administration has so far shown no reaction to the bill that has been tabled in the Senate. What does that tell us?
Biden, Senator, and now the President Biden is a very, you can say, a proactive sort of a politician. He's not reactive or short-tempered or whatever you can call it. And he is very calculative. He will weigh the side, and he will obviously the national interest of the United States and its global interest will weigh a lot. And the best thing about if you read the U.S. Foreign policy is that they are always willing to quote the opposite side to their benefit, and that has really explained the zenith of the U.S. global power around the world. So they have made friends with their enemies. They have made friends with the difficult people. They are having trade with the China. They are having trade with all the earlier opponents as well. So this is a sort of their real politic and their success around the world. They have their failures to themselves, but the fact is that the U.S. Grip on the world economically and specifically economically remains a large story.
Also, Ms. Shabbana Fayyaz, my last question to you would be that Pakistan right now is in a position where it's taking quite a defensive role. All the statements that are being given are very defensive in nature, whereas the US has taken quite an offensive role. How would this be impacting the Pakistan-US relations in general?
I personally don't agree with the reactive-based foreign policy output, and this is whether it is by our political stalwarts or other leaders around the country. The fact is that we should not be misleading the nation as the Pakistani, and we should not be misconstructing the fact. The public memory is a very short memory. It takes a lot to erode it, and we should not be doing it for quick fixes. We do have the issues with the United States and the other parts of the world as well. But this does not mean that one incident and one bill should derail the whole process of our interactions with the parts of the world.
Because always, whatever the world powers have said to Pakistan, for example, in the past, we heard the statement a lot that do more, do more. Pakistan has been going for it. Pakistan has been fighting the war on terror itself. And now Pakistan is being blamed for being, Pakistan is called a co-accused as far as terrorism is concerned, which is quite ironic in nature, I presume, because Even today, in intelligence-based operation, one of our Pakistan Army people has been martyred, which is quite sad. And I think the US should empathize with Pakistan a bit, and I think there should be more cooperation, and the US should move with more diplomacy. Don't you think so?
Well, I'll buy your argument half and half again, Umar, because I really feel that we are not asked to do more really at this stage. Yes, there have been FATF pressures on us. There have been and there will continue to be IMF pressures because of our economic disorder and the otherwise. We were asked to do more on a war on terror, but the fact is that there is need to do on our for our own sake. Leaving aside Afghanistan, we have our own indigenous issues, and we should not be blaming and externalizing everything on the other side. Number one. Number two is that why we need the US sympathy. And
Right. Right. Thank you, Ms. Shabbana Fayyaz. Thank you very much for giving us your time and your insight in this very important argument that we were having a little debate as far as the US-Pakistan relations and the bill which has been tabled in the US Senate. Now, we will be moving on to our second segment, that is about the US deal which hastened the collapse of Kabul. First of all, we have a little report prepared, and then we will have a little debate with our guest.
The perception of Afghan government and security apparatus, followed by American withdrawal, was the writing on wall as United States artificially propped up a non-representative setup in ethnically rich country. Senior Pentagon officials have also acknowledged before United States Congress that Afghan debacle can be traced to half-baked 2020 American deal with Taliban. General Frank McKenzie, the head of Central Command, told the House Armed Service Committee that once the U.S. troop presence was pushed below 2,500 as part of President Joe Biden's decision in April to complete a total withdrawal by September, the unraveling of the United States-backed Afghan government accelerated. The Premier Imran Khan has periodically emphasized that Pakistan surely could not be blamed for the fact that 300,000 plus well-trained and equipped Afghan security forces saw no reason to fight the lightly armed Taliban. Pakistan has repeatedly cautioned that Afghan war was unwinnable given the history of country and advocated for negotiated settlement. Moreover, Pakistan suffered over 80,000 casualties and lost over $150 billion in the economy, besides driving 3.5 million citizens from their homes by joining American war on terror. The deeply partisan of United States Congress is seemingly non-conducive place for serious national introspection, as blaming frontline state Pakistan went beyond rhetoric in American corridors of power. The United States must objectively review its strategic blunders before unjustly slinging out Pakistan to blame for the situation unraveled in Afghanistan. The deeper question is that will political expediency prevail in United States Congress, or serious introspection into lessons of Afghan war will outline American global strategy?
Well, now, the US officials, US defense officials, say that the US-Taliban deal has hastened the Afghan collapse, the collapse of Kabul. Now, for a debate, we have with us Air Commodore retired Basit Raza Abbasi Saab. He's a defense analyst. Mr. Abbasi, welcome to BTV World.
Thank you.
Right. So, of course, we know that whatever has been happening in Afghanistan, we saw how quickly the Taliban took control of the whole country. And later on, when Panjshir was left, we saw how Taliban took control of that as well. According to US officials, they blame sort of perhaps the Doha agreement, which was signed between the Taliban and the US. And according to them, the deals should not have been made, or perhaps the Biden administration should not have rushed into it. What's your take on that?
Actually, this deal didn't happen in a day. This was in the making since last 2 years. And President Trump was really wanted it to push it before the election. He couldn't do it. But if you noticed in the statement of General Milley, he said that it was since 5-6 years back, he had seen that this was a useless war and it's not getting anywhere. So what I feel personally is that the whole U.S. establishment is in a state of chaos. They don't know what hit them. And as you must have noticed in the Senate and House hearings yesterday and day before yesterday, the generals have very frankly admitted that whatever happened is an intelligence failure. I mean, they never expected that the Afghan government or whatever they have set up there, their armed forces, would crumble so quickly. So all these factors, their mistakes which have been perpetrated for the last 2 decades, one after another, and not listening to anybody. They were so sort of arrogant after the 9/11, and that without any sufficient evidence or concrete proofs.
Also, sir, reports have it that there was embezzlement in the funds which were given for perhaps construction for schools. They were not constructed, they were not made, and hence people saw that there was corruption. And perhaps that's why it led to a very quick fall of Kabul. That's why the Afghan army, they did not really resist the way they should have.
That's right. The world sees it now, and everybody is talking about it. But why could not the NATO forces, the American and NATO forces, why couldn't they see it happening in front of their eyes? They were present right there. It was happening in front of their eyes. So what the world is saying now, and even their own politicians and public and their journalists, everybody is saying the same thing. Why was it not seen? The corruption didn't happen in a day. It was stretched over a period of two presidencies of Ashraf Ghani, and even before that, during Hamid Karzai's time, it was rampant. And there are also reports that even the money was paid to Taliban by the Americans themselves for safe passages. So this kind of leaking of their resources, whatever they injected there, was going on. So the Afghan populace actually did not receive whatever money they spent. If that huge amount of money was spent of welfare of people on the infrastructure development and on the right causes, Afghanistan would have been a different country. So, I mean, it was only to feed and to sort of line the pockets of their cohorts like Ashraf Ghani and his party. And they left at the first possible instance. So this is what is a miscalculation on part of the Americans, and largely on part of the Americans, because they were in that leading role, and rest of the NATO countries and other countries, they were just following. And this was clearly highlighted after the debacle which took place, the fall of Kabul and all that, and even the British press and their politicians were very quick to say that UK made a great mistake by following the sort of dictations from the United States. So this is what is going on. The American public itself, their legislators in Senate and everywhere, their press, their media, and their allies, they're all sort of putting the blame on America. And the present American administration is under heavy pressure. And this was writ on the faces of the three generals. They are all generals, two of them serving and one retired. Lloyd Austin is also a retired general. So their faces were, it was very obvious, it was writ large on their faces that they have no real sort of reason to give except for finding the scapegoats. And some of them find the scapegoat in Pakistan, as that bill that has been moved in the American Senate to sort of, which is the Afghanistan Counterterrorism Oversight and Accountability Act, which is sort of maligning Pakistan for whatever has happened in Afghanistan. And whereas the world is actually trying to tell them that is the fault of United States of America.
True, true. And like one of the generals also mentioned
this
that
is my,
we built a state and not a nation, which is why it led to this.
By, there was a program by Mr. Fareed Zakaria on GPS, where he said that he sort of recounted whatever has happened in Afghanistan, and he said that there's no elegant way of losing a war. And I would like to say that there's an elegant way of losing the war. That is to admit that you have lost it and look back and try to find where you went wrong instead of trying to put the blame on others and scapegoating.
True, and of course, one of the generals, like I was mentioning, he said that we built a state and not a nation, and perhaps that's why we lost the war in Afghanistan. And also, we know that Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid has mentioned time and again, he has given the guarantee that no country would be harmed by the Taliban. Of course, he gave a guarantee for that. Not Pakistan, not the US, not any country from the Afghan soil. But still, we see that General Milley and General McKenzie, of course, while talking to the Senate, they said that the US is a threat because the militancy has not ended. The Taliban still have ties with Al-Qaeda. Why is the US media reporting in such a way? So are you there with us? So can you hear me? Right. We know that Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid has time and again mentioned he has given guarantees that no country would be harmed as long as Taliban are in power. He gave a guarantee to Pakistan, he gave a guarantee to the US that none will be harmed, and there is no threat of militancy, there is no threat of terrorism to any other country. Now, we were talking to Air Commodore retired Basit Raza Abbasi. Mr. Abbasi, can you hear me? Right, we will get to him as soon as we get in touch with him. But we know that the debate has been going on in the American media in the Capitol Hill that the Taliban are now a threat to the whole world. They are not given any representation in the UN. No ambassador has been assigned for the US. The US is not forming any diplomatic relations with the Taliban, with Afghanistan. But now we see that things have come to a very critical juncture because now the countries have to move on. Pakistan has to move on. The US has to move on. The US has used enough of the taxpayers' money for 20 years. And according to one of the generals of the US, this was a futile effort. He foresaw this, and he mentioned in the debate in the US Senate that I saw that if the troops would go below 2,500 mark, the Taliban will take over, the Afghan army will fall down, Kabul will fall down. And we did see that happening. But nobody actually expected this to happen so fast as it did, as we saw in Afghanistan, as we saw the situation evolving slowly and gradually, and we saw how the Taliban took over the whole country in such a short period of time. Even the US did not look into it. They weren't expecting that, and it happened. Now, I quote that as far as the Doha Agreement is concerned, like we were discussing it, it said the signing of the Doha Agreement had a really pernicious effect on the government of Afghanistan and on its military. This was said by General McKenzie. He said that the effect was pernicious in terms of psychological effect, military effect more than anything else, and we did set a date certain for when we were going to leave and when they could expect all assistance to end. Obviously, this was said beforehand, before time, in the Doha Agreement, which was signed between the Taliban and the US. The sport had to end sometime, and of course by July 2021 it was decided that troops would be withdrawn from Afghanistan, but that happened in August. All the troops were withdrawn from Afghanistan. They went back to the US. Pakistan played a very important part as far as helping all the expats in Afghanistan was concerned. Pakistan provided its own Islamabad airport so that all the expats could go to their own countries. Now, Air Commodore retired Basit Raza Abbasi is back with us. He's a defense analyst. Mr. Raza, welcome to BTV World, sir, again. Now, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, I can hear you, please.
Cool. Now, as I was mentioning that Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid has mentioned he's given guarantee that no country would be harmed from Afghan soil, be it Pakistan or the US. But we hear statements from the US that they are still under threat from the Taliban and their militancy because they have ties with Al-Qaeda. What are your comments on that?
I personally feel that Americans are in a lot of hurry and they are not ready to give them time. Afghan government has been there since last about 6 weeks. They have given their commitments and they are trying to put their act together. I think they need to be given time because they have been fighting a very long drawn war which went on for last 4 decades. And their country, their infrastructure and everything is destroyed. And a very cruel winter is approaching, for which they have to make preparations and sort of food, medicine and other things have to be sort of stored. All these challenges are there which are more important for them. I personally feel that world generally has to be reasonable, and this is what Pakistan has been demanding, that instead of trying to isolate Afghan government, the various countries should actually try to engage them, to work with them. And that's how we can sort of, the world can...
safeguard the human rights and women's education and inclusive government and all those things which the world has been demanding, and the Taliban have committed that they will be providing that. So I think this is only increasing the challenge and sort of putting them in a very tight spot. This is not fair. They should be given a fair chance to prove themselves and prove that what they say, they mean it. But they need to be given time for that.
The US general also calls it a strategic failure, which I think is a huge statement to be given by a US general.
Yes. He says that it's a logistic success, not a strategic failure. I think strategic failure is more encompassing, and it sort of everything is a subset of the strategic actions and achievements. And here is the point that the war has now ended. There has been agreement, and although one of the generals said that Taliban have not fulfilled the agreement, but as I read the agreement, Taliban have fulfilled every condition. It's the Americans who have violated one after another. I can quote a few. The date of withdrawal has been changed. They have attacked the Afghan population even after the fall of Kabul, even when the present government took over. They sort of the drone attack for which now the American general, I think McKenzie has taken the responsibility that I was in command and I take responsibility for that. But taking that responsibility doesn't sort of bring back those 7 children and 3 other people who lost their lives as in the final military action of the US and their allies. So these.
Now, also, Mr. Raza Abbasi, if you can hear me, we know that there is instability in the region still. We know that the war has ended, but there is still instability as far as India and Pakistan are concerned, as far as different countries are concerned who are at conflict with each other. Now, how would these negatively impact the whole region if we talk about the situation in Afghanistan and if it does not improve?
You see, there are at least 5-6 countries, the neighbors of Afghanistan,
who are directly affected by the events, whatever events take place in Afghanistan. And very surprisingly, India wants to jump into the fray. But India has no borders with Afghanistan. But still they want to play a role in Afghanistan because that is the place from where they can stab us in our backs. So this is what is hurting. This is the kind of politics and the rigmarole that's going on, because the immediate neighbors of Afghanistan, be it Pakistan, China, Uzbeks, Tajiks, Iran, they are all, and even Russia, who's not directly a neighbor, but actually it has its interest because the Central Asian states are abutting Russia, and it is concerned with the events taking place over there. But all these countries are trying to sort of help out Afghan government through this state of transition. But the other countries of the world who are actually there, sitting there for last 2 decades, they are not ready to give the time and space to the present Afghan government. And this is what the real politic is at the moment, and this is what we see it happening. Pakistan has actually gone from pillar to post, trying to convince that first we tried to convince the world and Americans that there is no military solution to Afghanistan, and that has proved correct. They admitted themselves now that there was no military solution to Afghanistan. If you are convinced that there was no military solution to Afghanistan, then please sit down and negotiate. Let's sort of leave the military options and the this kind of the act, this Afghanistan Counterterrorism Oversight and Accountability Act. This kind of measures will not sort of take you out of the war-like euphoria and that feeling. So the world has to come out of that militaristic mindset and think peace and talk peace and act peace at the moment.
Also, in the beginning, Pakistan really helped all the other countries, all the expats living in Afghanistan, specifically talking about the American troops. They helped them get back home. They gave them the Islamabad airport to come back and to then go back to their homes. Now, instead of being thankful, Pakistan is now being brought into this whole rigmarole of events that is happening, that Pakistan perhaps assisted Afghanistan, assisted the Taliban in taking over Afghanistan. Also, can you comment on the situation whether the US is doing this because it's under a lot of pressure, or because everything is under a lot of chaos as far as the complete troop withdrawal is concerned?
This is
are you getting me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Actually, what's happening is that America doesn't know where to go. And more than anybody, the American president is under a lot of pressure with all the criticism from within and outside, from his allies. And I think the one step that they took, which is the AUKUS, the Australia, UK and US thing, that infuriated their own ally, very close ally, France, which is a NATO ally. So, I mean, this is a sort of haphazard measures. And same is true about Pakistan. Sometimes they say that Pakistan helped us in reaching the Doha agreement, and they have given us credit for that. And even yesterday's House hearing, General McKenzie said that we are still working with Pakistan to get an air corridor. And the A-lock and G-lock kind of facilities which Pakistan provided, rightly so, or that may be debatable. But despite all that, despite all the positive steps taken by Pakistan to let...
Right. Thank you, Air Commodore retired Basit Raza Abbasi, the defense analyst. He was talking to us regarding the Afghan situation. Thank you very much for joining us and giving us your insight. And of course, we were discussing today's very important aspect, the news that is circulating all over the media in the US, in the Pakistani media, all over the world, that things are actually very chaotic. We will be talking more about this. You keep watching BTV World. Thank you for joining Newsroom.